Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris, tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, President and Executive Editor of the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Lee Harris, Shelby County Mayor. Thanks for being here again.
Sure, thanks a lot for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. We'll talk about a range of things. You've got a lot going on. We're just talking 115 days or so into the office. But let's start with juvenile justice and a couple of things happening sort of simultaneously here. One is that a report from one of the monitors of the Juvenile Justice Center after 6 years of federal oversight, that oversight ended recently, and 2 of the 3 monitors are going to issue reports. One came out and it was very harsh in terms of the treatment of juveniles and the way that the Juvenile Justice Center is operated. Simultaneously, there's a vote coming up in early January, I think January 9th, on $130 million to fund a new Juvenile Justice Center, and I think the idea is that later on there'd be renovations to the older facility. Is this the right time to be spending $130 million on a Juvenile Justice Center when there is a whole lot of criticism and there are a lot of questions about how the Juvenile Justice Center is being run?
So the total cost is about $25 million, and what will happen on January 9th is we'll bring a proposal to solve a real problem in terms of juvenile justice in this community. And the first down payment of that $25 million project is $1.3 million. And so we'll bring that January 9th to the county commissioners for their consideration. There is a nationwide problem of kids that are caught up in the juvenile justice system that are detained, that don't have adequate classrooms, that don't have any kind of real path to rehabilitation. And so they end up on the wrong side of the law, and that cycle continues for the rest of their lives. Remember, we've got about 65 kids in our detention facility right now, but 12 to 17 years old. And the one thing we know about those kids that are in our system right now, they'll be there on average for about 25 days. We know that those kids are going to be part of this community for the rest of our lives, right? The people that sit at this table. And so the question is, while we have them in custody for 25 days, either we're going to stay mission focused on rehabilitation and an opportunity for them to be meaningful members of our society, or they will cycle back and forth into the criminal justice system for years and years and years to come. They will be the perpetrators of crimes in the future that affect my kids and your kids, and so it is best, in my view, to invest in them right now, and part of that is making sure that we have a place that has classrooms, that has recreational space, that has a place where they can see a little bit of grass. These are the things that we're talking about, and so that's where we're going to the county commission. We're saying, hey, let's focus on solving this problem. Let's focus on these kids. Let's put them on the right track. Let's give them adequate classrooms and recreational space so that those 25 days, they can remember that they are children and they don't become hardened criminals during that time when they are locked up.
I should say first, Judge Dan Michael, who oversees the Juvenile Justice Center, has been on the show before. We'll try to have him come on because I'm going to quote from this report from the monitor, and I don't want to speak for him, but I have a feeling he disagrees with quite a bit of it. So I just want to say that a couple times during the show. You said 25 million is the vote. You're bringing forward 25 million. Where did I get 130 million? Is that completely out of thin air?
So I'm not sure. Again, the big idea is to build a center for rehabilitation for these kids, which we do not have right now. Right now, the 65 kids that are detained for an average of 25 days do not have adequate classroom space. Okay. They do not have a lot of windows.
What you're bringing forward is 25 million first, so I've got an inaccurate.
I'm bringing forth the down payment on a $25 million project. That down payment is about $1.3 million. Okay. It will take us at least 18 months from when we get county commission approval to actually get, to move some dirt and actually start to erect this center. But the idea is just simply is that it's going to take some investment in these kids if we are really going to be thoughtful about rehabilitation. The other issue is a separate issue. Those are due process issues, and those are issues raised in the report. So what I'm focused on is the kids that are detained, and how do we make sure they are rehabilitated, and how do we make sure that they reintegrate and have a reasonable opportunity of success in life.
All right, Bill.
Do we detain too many children, regardless of what the circumstances are of that detention and the help they get or don't get? Do we detain too many children?
Yes, we definitely do. So there are 60, and people have been working on this for a long time, and the numbers have come down. And right now, as I sit here today, it's about 65 kids that are detained, and as I said, they're there for more than 25 days. Well, we've got about 4,000 kids a year that get a criminal summons, meaning they interact with law enforcement. Law enforcement has probable cause to believe they've committed a crime, and they have to then later appear at juvenile court in front of a probation officer. So it is a real interaction with the juvenile justice system, with the criminal justice system. So that affects a lot of kids. So that's 4,000 kids a year. And then we have kids that commit very serious crimes that are detained. That's the 65 kids that I keep talking about. With respect to both categories, there is way too much interaction with the criminal justice system, and there is not enough opportunity for juveniles, for kids. And so that's what we're trying to solve. With respect to the 4,000, you've seen my administration bring to the County Commission this idea, which started with Mayor Luttrell, was the idea that we should have a youth assessment center in Shelby County. This is a place where law enforcement can take kids instead of them interacting with the criminal justice system at all. Right now they get a criminal summons, they have a probation officer, and a more or less a hearing in front of a probation officer. Let's do away with all that for some of these kids. Let's not have them interact with law enforcement at all. Let's give them a place to go where they can get the help they need. Remember, the vast majority of kids that get this criminal summons, the 4,000, what do we know about this population? The vast majority of them have had an adverse child event. They've had a trauma already in their lives. Most of them, in addition, have some sort of substance or mental illness, substance abuse or mental illness. And so all these kids, or the vast majority of them, need some kind of help. So let's stop taking them down to juvenile court. Let's stop having them interact with the criminal justice system. In some cases, these minor offenses, the trespassing cases, the reckless driving cases, the caught with small amounts of drug cases, the underage drinking cases. Let's stop taking them down to juvenile justice, and let's have an alternative where they get the help they need, don't have a record or any interaction whatsoever with the criminal justice system. That's what the Youth Assessment Center is. It'll be housed on UT campus, right? UT Medical School is going to administer it. That is far away from juvenile court. That is far away from 201 Poplar. And in that assessment center, we envision social service operators and churches and counselors being able to deliver services to kids in need and avoiding any of the rest of this stuff.
It's also very far away from what this started out as. The original talk about the assessment center was that it would be a part of juvenile court, but that somehow the children there would not interact with the system. How did this evolution come about? And also, we should say the assessment center is voluntary.
Oh, yeah,
for the children and their parents. So how did this change?
So there are a whole lot of false ideas about some of what is going on right now in order to rehabilitate kids and put them on the right track. I've described some of these ideas as fringe because they feel fringe to me. In other words, it is a good idea that a kid does not go to juvenile court, does not have to see a probation officer, does not interact with the criminal justice system. That's what the Youth Assessment Center does. That is a good idea. These other kinds of imagined possibilities are just that. They feel like chasing ghosts. The Juvenile Justice Center, the Youth Assessment Center, which I have seen, which is under construction, is on UT's campus. It is not under Dan Michaels' control, right, to be frank. It is not at juvenile court. That is downtown. UT is somewhere else altogether. So a lot of this stuff is chasing ghosts. I can't comment on things that I don't have any idea where these things are coming from.
Is that important to you? You mentioned Judge Dan Michael, who, again, we've reached out to have on a future show to talk about all these kinds of issues. That's a priority for you, is that those kids aren't under the Juvenile Justice Center, that they aren't under Dan Michael specifically, or the Juvenile Justice Center as a concept? It
is very important to me that we have a place to send kids where they are not under the heavy hand of law enforcement. So that includes courtrooms, and obviously Dan Michaels runs the juvenile courtroom. That means law enforcement. And that means prosecutors. That means they don't have to interact with that criminal justice system, and that system does include a lot of component parts from courtrooms to law enforcement to prosecutors. prosecutors. They don't have to do any of that at UT, on UT's campus.
So for people who watch and listen and think, okay, but what about the violent criminals? And they are sometimes teenagers. They are sometimes kids. You know, often in the media, it's a grainy, security camera footage, or it's some kind of incident, and it strikes tremendous fear in people, and terrible things have happened. Phil Trineri is probably the most prominent one in recent memory, the former head of the chamber who was killed, where there's at least some accusation and some security camera footage of some teenagers being involved in some way. No one's been, gone through the whole legal process. To those people who are so fearful of violent crime and hear what you're saying about mental health and classrooms, what do you say to them about safety and a fear of violent criminals, be they teenagers or not?
So we've got 3 categories of juvenile offenders, of kids who end up on the wrong side of the law. I've talked about the 4,000 that get a criminal summons from year to year for minor offenses and have that first interaction, which is a dangerous precedent at such an early age. And if we could redirect some of them away, Youth Assessment Center. We've got the next category that have committed more heinous type crime, serious crime. Those are the 65 that are in juvenile court. What I would say to folks that are worried about those 65, and rightfully we should have some concerns, public safety concerns about that 65, is those 65 are going to outlive most all of us. And they are going to be in this community for longer than all of us. And so the question, the real public safety concern is if their prospects for the future are dimmed. We need to do what we can to expand opportunity for them, because they're going to be here and they're going to be either have positive opportunity in our community going forward for the rest of their life, or they're going to be cycling in and out of the system. And each time they do, there's probably a victim on the other side of that ledger. The third category of juvenile offenders are the ones that have committed the really, really heinous crimes. You write the Phil Trineri murder is one of those kinds of cases, and those are the ones that are held at Jail East, and they have been adjudicated or noticed to be adjudicated as an adult. And so they're held in a separate facility altogether. And even with those kids, there may be something we can do there. I mean, we've certainly talked about some of those solutions there, because no matter what we think, all these folks, right? All these folks get out someday. Yeah. All these folks return to this community. They don't go anywhere else, right? And so they are part of this community, whether we like it or not. Let's make some investments, let's save them. I mean, with respect to the 65, and we've got opportunity, with respect to the 65 that are in juvenile court right now, for example, we have talked to Building and Trades Council, one of the unions in town which holds apprenticeship programs. We've talked about the fact that these juveniles are there for 25 days or so. And what if we built a classroom for vocational training, a state-of-the-art shop, if you will, as part of this new Juvenile Justice and Education Center? What if we built one of those classrooms in there? Would you come in and teach a curriculum specifically geared toward these kids so that their interest is raised in an actual job or a trade while they are in custody for 25 days? They've agreed to do it. So we've got some tremendous opportunity to both have classroom instruction, the minimum required of 4 hours of education. We've got some real opportunity to give the kids access to, whether it's day or night, because they get windows and a library, all these kinds of things to remind them that they're children. Right now, they're under our custody for 24 hours a day. They are a ripe target for us to pour into them love and opportunity and to get a lot of things done.
All right, Bill, with 10 minutes left.
Is there a risk here that children fall between the cracks? Because everything that you're talking about, the detention center, I take it, would be run by the Shelby County Sheriff. The juvenile justice system, the court itself, is administered by an elected juvenile court judge. How often do you think that the children in the system are not necessarily a victim of some intentional policy, but rather that they're in a gray area where no one really knows whose responsibility it is?
I think there's a lot of kids that fall through the cracks, and it's not just Memphis and Shelby County. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you do any amount of research on this issue, you will find out that many of these kids are thrown away around the entire country. In other words, the fact that we don't have adequate classroom space and recreational space is not unique to Shelby County or Memphis. you can see it all over the country, that the kids, when they are detained, that they become hardened criminals. They forget they are children, and they don't, go to school every day for the minimum required amount of time. So I think a lot of kids are being left behind. A lot of kids are falling through the cracks. A lot of kids are being forgotten, and these are the conversations we need to have about how to solve it. And we brought the Youth Assessment Center, which we've got County Commission approval. On January 9th, we'll bring a proposal for a down payment on a Justice and Education Center so that we can start investing in these kids, and we'll continue to try to come up with ways to put these kids on the right track. And I should also say, when it comes to educating these kids, this Shelby County Schools is the one that has been leading that effort. So Shelby County Schools runs a school inside our juvenile court system right now, but they don't do it as well as they could, because they don't have adequate classroom space, right? And we've got social service operators that would love to come in, but they can't do it because we don't have adequate space, right? The library is a jail cell for all intents and purposes. That is not the way to treat our kids. We need to not throw them away. The basketball court doesn't have a rim, right? So you can't play basketball very well without a rim. I have been to state prisons, and obviously I was a state official and so forth, and been to our biggest state prisons. Our state prisons are better than our juvenile facility, and in the state prison, we're doing a lot of different things, a lot of different programming. In our juvenile facility, we're singularly mission focused on rehabilitation. We don't have outdoor facility. We don't have vocational training. The penal farm has vocational training. The penal farm, you can learn to build a birdhouse, right? If you are serving 7 years, have committed a serious felony, and get sent to the penal farm, you can learn a skill like how to build a birdhouse. But if you're a 12 to 17-year-old and you get sent to juvenile court for 25 days, you're more or less, if the facility stays the way it is, you are not given that kind of opportunity. And I would argue you have been forgotten.
But there are people who will listen who will say, yeah, but they shouldn't do those programs at the penal farm, that they shouldn't do those vocational programs. I disagree with those people.
Right. I disagree with those people. So if that's what they say, we listen. Over 90% of the people that are in prison right now are returning to our community, and we've got to do something to make sure they don't repeat offend. And we all know the recidivism rates, they are extremely high. The recidivism rates for young folks nationally are also high. 60 to 70% of young folks that interact with the criminal justice system as a juvenile re-interact. And so we've got to get that recidivism rate lower, and Shelby County Schools would argue that investments in classrooms and Hope Academy, the people that administer the classrooms at our facility now, is the way you really reduce that recidivism rate.
Back to Phil.
Does a referral to the assessment center depend on the officer that interacts with the child? And if so, is there more training around using that discretion to go to the assessment center?
We can't slow down, right? I've heard all these arguments. Oh, let's wait till every officer has gone through a month course. Let's wait, right? We can't wait, right? There are 4,000 kids that get a summons every year. 4,000 kids that interact with the criminal justice system and therefore have a high probability of recidivism. Let's solve problems. Let's act. So I can think of 100 reasons why we should wait. Oh man, we got one officer who works part-time on Beale Street who hasn't learned what this means, right? Listen, let's do all those things at the same time.
Is it up to, and there'd be multiple entities here, you have MPD, you have the sheriff, you'd have the suburban police. It's up to them where they take, is that when you say it's voluntary, it's up to that police officer or law enforcement person?
It's up to the kid. So it's up to the kid. Up to the kid. But the good news is this takes a lot of effort to get to this point. Because remember, law enforcement probably are not naturally predisposed to try something new. But Memphis Police Department, thanks to the great work of the director there and Mayor Strickland, have agreed to try this out. Okay. This is a very different kind of thing, right? The prosecutors agreed, the courtrooms have agreed, the state has agreed. Right. To create a juvenile diversion program is, it is challenging, but we are at a place where we actually can do something different to intervene and save these kids. And
we'll
I think
move
we should
on to
try.
Some other topic, but I will say we have Tammy Sawyer, County Commissioner, on next week. Josh Spickler from Just City, which does criminal justice reform advocacy, all next week, talking about these issues. And also, we're trying to get Judge Dan Michael on to talk about it. Let's move on to some other things, just because we've got what here.
Can I say one more word?
7 minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Only other word I'd say on this topic is what, with respect to the Youth Assessment Center, which again, the minor offenses committed by kids. With respect to that center, right now we're just rolling out a pilot project So a lot of this will come out in the wash. In other words, we'll collect a lot of data, and that data will help inform how we expand this particular model. So the training thing will be answered. A lot of these questions will be answered.
Because it's $500,000 for over 3 years that's been approved, and I don't know that even the most vehement advocates for this think that $500,000 is enough to do it the way they want. Okay. You've had a lot going on. We've got, 6 minutes left here to kind of touch on some things. One thing is, and you ran on this, is some challenges to the economic development activities and the process in Memphis and Shelby County. And most recently, you raised questions about, there's a $950 million project proposed downtown Union Row. It received a TIF. And I think, and I'm paraphrasing, I'll let you speak for yourself, but you said, how are we approving this after just 30 minutes of discussion? There ought to be more vetting, more exploration. We got to slow the process down. And if we're going to give these kinds of tax incentives, millions of dollars over 30 years, we ought to do more research, vetting, and so on. What did you mean by that?
So I ran on things that impact a large number of people. So I didn't run on economic incentives. Instead, I ran on things like workforce and education and neighborhoods and transit. Right, those are the things that are really going to improve the condition for the 200,000 people in our county that live in poverty. So I did not run on economic incentives.
Fair enough. I meant that you mentioned, you talked about it. You were critical of some process. I didn't mean that was your only campaign.
So the county commission, I trust their judgment. They did approve this particular project. I think there were two considerations. The one consideration was really a real belief that we should move quickly, and there was my opinion that we should be very thorough and perhaps even negotiate a little bit. So I lost, but I lost. And so, the county commission decided that in its judgment, we should move quickly. The particular incentive that was under discussion is something called a TIF. Under state law, as we understand it, TIFs are the responsibility, decisions around TIFs are the responsibility of the legislative body, the county commission and the city council. Obviously, I would have preferred to have more time, but the project sounds great, and I hope it'll be successful, but it will freeze property taxes for 30 years. For 30 years, we know what kind of property taxes will be produced from that particular piece of property. And obviously over 30 years, one can imagine the growth. I mean, the county's expenses will grow, but the property taxes, at least with respect to that parcel, will stay flat. And so, these are considerations that I think will come out in a longer kind of discussion. But, there was a need to move quickly, according to the developers, and the county commissioners really wanted to partner with the development community, and I think that's perfectly fine.
And a TIF, this is not cash incentives to the developers. This is lowering the tax rate relative to, because they're going to put so much money in. I'm doing a poor job of explaining that in a short notice. You said you lost this one, but there will be other proposals. I mean, I could go through the long list of proposals that are coming forward. There's a sort of boom in development right now. You said I lost, but are you going to keep fighting for a slower or more methodical, I'll let you choose your word, process for future projects?
I represent the county, and so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that the county's interests are put forward, and that's just the way it is for me. And I will advocate on behalf of the county and the taxpayers and so forth. I've always done that in my career, and I think it's even more my responsibility in this capacity to say kind of what the county's needs are. And so, sometimes I'll win, sometimes I'll lose. It's a great project, there is reason to believe that we should move fast, and that's what the county commission decided, and I am supportive of their decision.
2 minutes, Bill.
You have now named an educational liaison to your administration, a major part of what you've talked about in terms of education policy. Who is that person? Where did they come from?
So we just named the education liaison this week, and we renamed it, by the way, so this is going to be our director of education. Okay. And their portfolio is going to actually be quite large over time, but we picked someone who could have a lot of credibility with decision makers in our various school systems. So we have 7 school systems in our county. The most important one is obviously the Shelby County school system. So we picked the former superintendent. And so Cedric Gray is the person we named, and Dr. Cedric Gray is the former superintendent of the largest school district in the state of Mississippi, the Jackson-Madison County School District. And so he will start the first week of January, and we're really excited. The other thing I'll mention about his background is he is a Memphian. So born and raised in Memphis and a product of the Memphis City Schools, who's gone on to do great work. He comes to us with the endorsement of people like Carol Johnson, a former superintendent of our school system, and with the endorsement of Dorsey Hobson, another, recent superintendent of our school district. So we're really excited about him being able to kind of pull us all together and work cooperatively on really one of the most important things in our county, and that is making sure that we have students with opportunity.
You mentioned Dorsey Hobson was on the show recently. He's outgoing superintendent. He did put forward a plan to close 20-something schools over a number of years and consolidate schools and build new schools. Are you supportive of that plan, if not maybe the actual details, but the gist of that direction?
I am supportive of leadership. And in my view, these are the kinds of things we should be talking about, right? Union Row, I love it on the front page, that's fine, but it's much more important to talk about the schools, our capacity to give opportunity to kids. And so Dorsey Hobson's, whether you agree with the plan or not, he has had some of his best days in recent weeks because he has teed up an issue that actually matters, right? Matters to hundreds of thousands of people in our community, an issue that could really affect and change lives and lift people out of poverty. It's a discussion on education. That's the kind of issue that should dominate the news. And so I am just so appreciative that he has teed up this issue. And I'm processing the content of the plan, and the jury's still out on that.
All right. Thank you for being here. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Bill, thank you for being here. And thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.